She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know, and she's got me living in a chemical.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. Today we are talking about the case of Kassandra Cantrell, a 33-year-old woman who went missing in Parkland, Washington on August 25th, 2020. I have been following this case since it happened, waiting for them to name or arrest a suspect, and now that Halloween is over and there have been some updates in the case, I feel like we can finally discuss it. But before we do, let's have a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, Magellan TV. Magellan TV is a new kind of documentary streaming service that has something for everyone, whether you're interested in true crime, history, science, nature, or really anything else. Magellan TV has over 3,000 documentaries that will satisfy all your interests, and they add more every single week. For those of you who have already signed up or are planning to, I have the most interesting recommendation. It's a documentary called Psychopath: Redefining Rational. And after the whole Joel Guy trial, watching this was honestly illuminating for me. Psychopaths probably make up around 20% of the prison population in both the USA and Britain. They are 4 times more likely to reoffend than other released prisoners, yet they're just as likely to get parole, which is something I didn't know. And that's really why I love Magellan TV, because I love to learn new things, even if it's just one new thing a day, a new fact to store away in my brain, because I'll most likely need to return to it at some point at a later time for a video or in a conversation with someone who thinks they're the smartest person in the room. You know these people. I know you do. You know exactly who I'm talking about, right? And isn't it fun when you can best them with a little known fact or a tidbit of information they had no idea about? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I answered for you. Magellan TV was created by documentary filmmakers, the people who know best what makes a great film, and they share your passion for gripping true stories. So they continue to scour the globe for films and series with the most cutting-edge subjects, the most dramatic imagery, and authentic insights from the world's top historians, scientists, and explorers. And watching Magellan TV could not be easier, as it is compatible with Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Google Play, Vizio, iOS, and more. You can watch Magellan TV on your smartphone, tablet, laptop, or TV. So whether you're on the go and trying to find something to kill some time while you wait 30 minutes in the waiting room at the doctor's office, true story, or you're settling in for a long day of documentary binge watching on your living room couch, Magellan TV has a way for you to enjoy smart and entertaining documentaries. Magellan TV is television worth watching, and right now they're offering viewers of this channel a 1-month free trial to try the service out. There's no strings attached. You can cancel whenever you want, but I don't think you'll want to once you get in there and you see all they have to offer. All you have to do to take advantage of this free month trial is to click on the link in the description box and start watching. And you also have to let me know what you're watching so that I can check it out in case I haven't seen it yet. Thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring this channel, and thanks to all of you out there who continue to come back and watch my videos, understanding that we need sponsors on this channel so I can keep bringing you content. Let's jump into the video. Kassandra Cantrell lived with her mother, Marie, in Parkland, Washington. She was outgoing and full of life. She loved vintage clothes, something I can definitely relate to. She loved spending time with her best friend, Alexandra, and her family. She was looking forward to a new chapter in her life, becoming a mother. On July 16th, Kassandra went to the doctors and she was told that she was pregnant. She was going to have a baby, which was great news, according to everybody who knew her. Her mother, Marie, said that, yes, it was unexpected, but Kassandra was really looking forward to becoming a mom. And Kassandra was happy because she thought her window of having a baby had passed. She'd already picked out names, and she had all these plans laid out for what kind of life her baby would have. Her mother, Marie, said, quote, she was going to have Mr. Rogers stuff and all the original Sesame Street and all the old Disney because she wanted this sort of gentle, magical life for the baby. I would tease her and say, the grandma is supposed to be the one who spoils the grandchild, so what are you leaving me to do now? End quote. Kassandra's first sonogram was scheduled for August 26th at 1:45 p.m., and she was supposed to meet her best friend Alexandra there, but Kassandra never showed up, which made Alexandra feel that something was very wrong. Kassandra had been looking forward to this day, the first day she would be able to lay eyes on her child, and she would never have willingly missed it. The next day, August 27th, Kassandra's mother, Marie, called 911 and filed a missing persons report on her daughter after she had not been home for several days and had not communicated with any of her friends or family. They had tried calling her several times, but the phone went right to voicemail, suggesting that it had either been turned off or the battery had died. According to Marie, the last time she had seen Kassandra had been on the morning of August 25th, when Marie had woken Kassandra up before she left for work around 7 a.m. Now, before Marie left the house that morning, Kassandra told her to have a good day at work and that she loved her. It was unknown exactly what Kassandra had planned to do that day, but she had mentioned going grocery shopping, a story her mother did not believe.
The only plans her mother knew she had that day was at some point to go grocery shopping.
I don't think that's where she was going when she left. Everything seemed to indicate that she might have been going to see somebody, because if she was going to the grocery store, she would have just put her hair in a ponytail, threw on some jeans, and and headed out. But it was clear that she'd taken a shower and gotten dressed. She'd taken some extra time. She doesn't do that just to go grocery shopping.
During the initial investigation, police were able to identify their main suspect pretty early on. Marie had told them that her daughter was pregnant but did not have a boyfriend. However, Marie mentioned that Kassandra had an ex-boyfriend who she was still friendly with. And although her daughter had told her the father of her child was another guy that she'd gone out with only a few times, Marie suspected the father of this baby was actually this ex-boyfriend. And Kassandra had just not wanted to tell her because she knew that her mother didn't really like this guy. Now, Marie knew the man's first name, and it was Colin. And she also knew that he lived in Tacoma, but she didn't know much else about him. Upon speaking to Kassandra's friend, Alexandra, police discovered that Kassandra had been seeing Colin over the past few months because she was lonely in quarantine, and that she believed Colin was the father of her child, but she was too afraid to tell him because he didn't want children, and he had a little bit of an anger problem. Apparently, when they had dated several years prior, Colin had told Kassandra that if any of his girlfriends ever got pregnant and refused to terminate the pregnancy, he would sue them to get full custody, just to spite the mother for having the child against his wishes. Sounds like a really stand-up guy. In the doctor's notes from Kassandra's July 16th doctor appointment, it stated that this pregnancy was not planned, that the patient was feeling overwhelmed, and that the father of the baby was supportive of the pregnancy, but not planning to be involved with raising the child. However, the doctor's notes also said that he and the mother were on good terms. Now, I suspect, and I have to believe, that Kassandra just told her doctor that her baby's father, whom she did identify as Colin Dudley, would be supportive of the pregnancy, because it doesn't appear that she actually told Colin she was pregnant until the following month, just days before she went missing. Kassandra had told her friend Alexandra that she'd told Colin on August 12th that she was pregnant, but he didn't have to be involved. She just thought he had the right to know and he could give up his parental rights, and she wouldn't ask him for child support. And 2 weeks later, she was gone. The detectives canvassed the neighborhood where Kassandra lived and found a neighbor who supplied them with video from their Ring doorbell, which would become the last known footage of Kassandra alive. This video showed a white car, matching the description of Kassandra's 2015 white Mazda 3 sedan, leaving the neighborhood with a single occupant driver at 8:32 a.m. As search parties began organizing to locate Kassandra, detectives went to the home of Colin Dudley in Tacoma to question him about his connection to the missing woman, only to find no one would answer the door when they knocked. Now, the officers left their business cards, and as they were leaving, a neighbor approached, and this neighbor was like, "Hey, are you looking for Colin and Rebecca?" Who's Rebecca, you might ask? Well, apparently, according to this neighbor, Rebecca was Colin's girlfriend, and they'd purchased this house together 3 years prior, and they'd been living there together ever since. Later this same day, which was August 28th, Colin called one of the detectives and informed them that he'd gotten their business card, but he wasn't sure what he could do to help them. He wasn't sure what he had to do with this. He knew Kassandra, but he hadn't seen her in years, and he knew nothing about her disappearance. But of course, at this point, the police aren't taking anyone's word at face value. They knew that Colin had in fact been in contact with Kassandra since he'd been named as the father of her baby to her doctor and several others, and the fact that he acted as if he'd had no contact with her for years was obviously suspicious. So they told him they still wanted to interview him in person, which they did the next day, August 29th. Now, the interview was scheduled for later in the day on August 29th, but before they interviewed him, early on the morning of that day, detectives were notified that Kassandra's vehicle had been found, abandoned near the Tacoma Dome Sports Center with the keys in the center console. Kassandra's mother did not believe that her daughter had driven herself there because she had no reason to be in this area. Investigators also discovered through Kassandra's mother, Marie, that Kassandra had been communicating with someone on August 19th who had a phone number Marie didn't recognize. It only took a quick comparison to discover that this phone number was in fact the telephone number of Kassandra's ex-boyfriend, Colin Dudley, who claimed he had not seen her or talked to her in years. Using this new information, the police were able to secure a warrant for Colin Dudley's cell phone records, which led to the discovery that Kassandra and Colin had been regularly communicating since February of 2020. So when detectives arrived at Colin's home for their preset interview, they were already armed with quite a bit of information, but he had no idea. The story that Colin told detectives was that he and Kassandra had met during a production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, during which she was a cast member and he was the director. They had dated for a couple of months, and then he'd broken up with her sometime in 2006. Since then, he claimed to have only seen her one other time, in 2010 or 2011, when he saw her working in the mall. This is honestly what stumped me about this whole case. And, questioning what his game plan was, I guess. It's 2020. Even if you're not a fan of true crime, you have to know that if someone's missing, law enforcement will most likely look into this missing person's cell phone records to find out people that they'd recently been in contact with. And Colin had texted Kassandra that same morning, the morning she went missing, as we will later discuss as we go over the timeline in more detail. So what was he hoping to achieve from outright denying that he'd even seen her in years? Now, his alibi for the date of August 25th was that although he had been off that day from work, he was busy spring cleaning his house. When asked what he did on August 26th, Colin said he'd brought some garbage to a dumpster owned by his employer, and then he went and got his bike repaired. And the cops gave him a chance to edit his story, to backpedal, to come clean, to at least having seen Kassandra in the weeks or the months leading up to her disappearance, but he refused to give an inch. When they told him that they'd heard she was pregnant and that he was the father, he said, "There's absolutely no way. Absolutely not. It's not possible." They kept pressing him and they asked, "Are you sure? You guys didn't reunite for one night and then cut ties after?" And Colin persisted in his story that he hadn't seen her in years. Before they left, detectives verified his phone number with him to make sure it was the same one as was on the warrant they were in possession of, and then they took his phone. From the evidence gathered, we're able to piece together a timeline for what seems to have happened to Kassandra Cantrell on the last day of her life. On August 25th at 6:55 a.m., Colin Dudley went to Costco and purchased a large box of 50-gallon garbage bags. At 8:11 a.m., a truck matching the description of Colin's 2017 Chevy Colorado pulled into the Tacoma Dome parking garage. A male was seen on surveillance exiting the truck. He removed a mountain bike from the bed of the truck and he rode away, leaving the vehicle there, and that's where the truck would remain for several hours. At 8:35 a.m., Kassandra left her house driving her Mazda, and at 8:49 a.m., she received a text from Colin Dudley. They haven't released what that text has said yet, but if this does go to trial, I'm sure we'll find out. Now, when the police took Colin's phone and they had it in their possession, they were able to verify that he did have Kassandra's number stored in his phone as a contact, just not under her real name. He had her listed as Velma, like from Scooby-Doo. It turns out that Halloween was Kassandra's favorite holiday, and she'd previously dressed up as the character for Halloween. After getting that text from Colin at 8:49 a.m., Kassandra's cell phone traveled to Colin's house or in the vicinity of his neighborhood, and it remained there for a few hours. Records showed that Colin had turned his phone on and off several times throughout that morning, but at 9:41 a.m. it was on and at his house, only to be turned off at 9:56 and remain off until 10:30, at which point Colin called the security company ADT. Less than 30 minutes later, at 10:53 a.m., Colin texted his live-in girlfriend Rebecca, telling her not to freak out. There had been a power outage and the ADT security cameras were down, but he was working on getting them back up and running. At 11:39 a.m., Colin's phone was turned off again, but Kassandra's remained on and moved from Colin's house and traveled to the area where her vehicle would later be found, the Tacoma Dome. Police collected surveillance from the area, and sure enough, they spotted not Kassandra driving her Mazda, but an unknown male wearing a fedora-type hat and latex gloves. This man, who we obviously believe was Colin Dudley, got out of Kassandra's car. He walked to the Dome's parking garage and got into a truck, the same truck that had been parked there hours earlier by him. It was his getaway vehicle, because he knew he was going to drive her car there and leave it, so he'd need transportation away from the Dome. He then got into the truck and drove away, but Kassandra's phone did not stop traveling, even though her car remained stationary. It traveled with Colin's truck, leaving the parking garage at 11:58 a.m. and traveling to the Owen Beach area of Point Defiance Park, where the phone stopped pinging after this. When police had discovered this was the last place Kassandra's phone was known to have been, her mother was skeptical. Kassandra had gone to the park a few times before to walk her two chihuahuas, but she'd left her dogs at home this morning, and Marie didn't see any other reason why Kassandra would have been at Defiance Point Park. That's because Kassandra wasn't at Defiance Point Park. She wasn't at Owens Beach, even though her phone had been thrown into the water there and was recovered later by divers. Kassandra, it seems, never made it out of her ex-boyfriend's house alive. Surveillance cameras captured a truck that looked like Colin's leaving Point Defiance Park just after 1 p.m., and around 1:30, Colin's phone turned back on at his home in Tacoma. Now, this is damning evidence, in my opinion. In using this evidence, law enforcement was able to secure a search warrant for Colin Dudley's home on September 1st, at which point they found blood in the basement, and then they brought in canine units trained in locating human remains, otherwise known as cadaver dogs. And they brought these dogs into the house and through the house, and the dogs showed interest at various areas in the basement.
At this point, we have not found her. She is still missing under highly suspicious circumstances. We're continuing to do multiple searches. We have other searches going on right now as we speak in different parts of the county. We plan on continuing to do these searches, and for a couple reasons. A process of elimination to make sure that we did them, to follow up on all the evidence we have, and also if there's any other evidence there, we can take that into consideration and use it to continue the investigation moving forward.
Do you have a person of interest or a suspect?
At this point, we do have a person that we want to either eliminate and clear or name him as a suspect. There were some things that led up to this that we haven't released yet that put us here. We're obviously here, not for any, there's a reason why we're here. A judge signed a search warrant. We're here, and we're going to process this house, and we're going to continue to work this case forward. We do have a suspect that we want to take a look at and to do a deeper dive into to see what involvement there is.
This is the home of the boyfriend?
This is a residence of an ex-boyfriend. From what we understand, depending on who you talk to, it's been an ex-boyfriend for quite some time. The information that led us here is that we did develop some new information that they may have been around each other recently, and that it wasn't just an ex-boyfriend from many years ago.
At this point, they have a lot of evidence, but no body. And I believe they could have arrested Colin at this time, but they wanted to build a stronger case against him before doing so, which is what they went on to do for the next few weeks. And part of this gathering evidence process was to obtain data from the GPS in Colin's truck. And using this GPS data, they found out that Colin's truck had been to all of these places. The Dome Garage, Owens Beach, and on the morning of August 26th, as Kassandra should have been getting up and preparing for the excitement of her first ever sonogram, Colin Dudley was driving to an area near the Chambers Bay treatment plant. His truck remained at this location for just 10 minutes before returning back to his house. It was September 22nd by the time the police had obtained this GPS data from Colin's truck, and this same day officers went to the area that Colin had been for just 10 minutes and began searching for what they now believed was a body, and they found Kassandra's remains located inside garbage bags that had been thrown over a steep hill down into a ravine-like type area. Even to a regular person like you and me, this seems pretty obvious. Kassandra told Colin she was pregnant. He didn't like that, so he made plans to lure her to his home on the morning of the 25th. Maybe he said he'd changed his mind and he wanted to be more involved in their child's life. Maybe he even told her he would go with her to the sonogram the next day. His girlfriend Rebecca was at work, I assume. She definitely wasn't home, and he had the house to himself. I speculate that he shut off his security cameras or disabled them in some way, so there would be no evidence that Kassandra had been there. Then he killed her in the basement where the blood was found. The autopsy conducted on September 23rd showed that her body was in an advanced state of decomposition, but she had been stabbed several times, and there had also been blunt force trauma to her head, several blows, it seemed like. In my opinion, Colin most likely knocked her out and then killed her before wrapping her in garbage bags that he'd purchased that same morning with the intent to use them on Kassandra's body once he killed her, which means he planned this, right? It was not some spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. It was premeditated, allegedly, in my opinion. Don't come for me. He then took her to the place where he had parked his truck. He dumped her car, went to Owens Beach, threw her cell phone into the water, and went home where her body still was. The next morning, he got up early, probably before his girlfriend Rebecca, so she wouldn't notice he was gone or see what he was doing. He then loaded Kassandra's body into his truck, drove to the area her body was found, and stayed there 10 minutes, just long enough to throw her body down a hill and pat himself on the back for getting away with it. 37-year-old Colin Dudley was arrested on September 22nd, and he was charged with the murder of Kassandra Cantrell. And as of now, it doesn't seem like his trial date has been set as of recording this as far as I can tell, but let's discuss this a little bit. And let's start with, what was he thinking? This is kind of the same thing I said in the Joel Guy Jr. video. What are these guys thinking, right? It's 2020. It may feel like nothing is normal in 2020, but one constant that still remains is Big Brother watches everything. Everywhere you go, every text you send, every picture you take, every Google search you make, it's being tracked and cataloged. Did Colin Dudley think that turning off his phone was sufficient to hide or cover up his deeds? Did he not consider that there's security cameras literally everywhere? Like everywhere? I mean, I remember just 10 years ago, there was security cameras, but mostly they were on businesses, and half the time they were just there for show. But now there's literally security cameras everywhere. Everyone's got one in their house. Every business has one, and usually they're cameras that can kind of see street views and look in multiple directions. They even have cameras in traffic lights and on, telephone poles and stuff. They're everywhere. Did Colin forget that there was GPS in his truck? Did he fail to consider that Kassandra had a loving family and a supportive friend who were familiar enough with her day-to-day routine so that they noticed when something was wrong? So that when her phone pinged at Owens Beach and her vehicle was found in Tacoma, they would probably suspect foul play? Was Colin's plan to kill Kassandra and then go back to his girlfriend and act normally? Never expecting anyone to show up and ask questions, he'd communicated with the victim from his own phone number the very same morning she went missing. And then he used that same phone to call the detectives to set up a police interview. Although I think it's safe to say that this was planned. I don't know how long he planned it. It could have been a couple of days. It could have been a couple of weeks. But I think it's also safe to say it was planned poorly, with very little attention to detail. And honestly, very little knowledge of how a police investigation works. And it's not hard to decipher the motive in this case. A, Colin was already in a relationship, and he had been cheating on his girlfriend for several months, which would have been hard enough to explain and bad enough as it is. But when Kassandra became pregnant, a new layer of complication was added to the mix. He would now have to tell his girlfriend, Rebecca, that not only had he been cheating on her, not only had he been unfaithful, but there was going to be a child that was going to be born to him now with another woman. And I think Colin had made it pretty clear in the most creepy way possible that he didn't ever want children. If Kassandra had actually told him not to worry, that she wouldn't ask him for anything, that he could be as involved or uninvolved in his child's life as he wanted to be, odds are he probably didn't believe her. And he felt that as long as Kassandra and her child were out there alive somewhere, there would always be a chance that it could come back and bite him. And Colin Dudley was not willing to take that chance. Now, from what I could tell, Colin is pleading not guilty. So I assume there's going to be a trial, and then we can have some updates and talk about this case more in depth when it happens. That's the good thing about Coffee and Crime Times, is we can kind of talk about these cases as they're happening, and we don't need all the information, and we can follow up with a longer video that has more in depth. You know, I'd love to watch a trial, see all the evidence. All I have now is basically an arrest affidavit. It was just 5 pages, so it gave the timeline, and it kind of gave some vague information about why Colin was the suspect and like what he had done and his movements, but it doesn't give specifics, and specifics are what I like to make a more in-depth video. But I definitely thought that this case needed to be talked about. You know, I feel so bad for Kassandra, and I don't know what it was about Kassandra Cantrell that sort of stuck to me. Of course, all the victims that I talk about in these videos are important to me, and there's something about each and every one of them that I can relate to, but for some reason, this woman just sort of stuck to me a little bit more. I felt like we had a lot in common, and, you know, she was known to be very sweet. I think her friend referred to her as like fireworks. You know, she would just be the person to walk into the room and light it up. She was loud. She loved life. She loved vintage clothes. Halloween was her favorite season. She was so excited to have this baby, even though she was pretty much going to do it on her own, but she wouldn't really be on her own, would she? She had her mother, Marie, who was so excited. She had her best friend, Alexandra, who had already gotten this baby cute little clothes for Halloween, and who was going to Kassandra's sonograms with her. She had this support system in place. She didn't need Colin Dudley. She was going to do this alone, and she was excited, and she was looking forward to it. And he took that from her, allegedly. He's not guilty yet, guys. So, you know, I think we can all safely say together that he probably did this, but it's alleged. He hasn't been convicted yet. So, for the sake of not getting sued, that is what we will say. However, I will keep an eye on this and see what comes of it. And I do want to announce something before I take my leave of you. I don't know why I spoke in such a fancy way. I've been watching too much of The Crown. On the day I'm recording this, which is November 18th, Us Weekly has just announced a new true crime podcast called Crime Weekly. And the co-hosts of that podcast are myself and Derek Levasseur, who I have gone live with a couple of times. I've gone live with him on Instagram, and we did a live on my YouTube channel that everybody really seemed to like. And I'm going to place in the description box the link to that podcast so you can go over and subscribe. The first episode is going to be going out Friday, December 4th, and then every Friday after that. So if you subscribe now, you'll never miss an episode. You can also listen to the trailer there. I'm going to link to our social media accounts so you can follow us on there. And
Hey guys, I'm Derek Levasseur, former police sergeant and licensed private investigator.
And I'm Stephanie Harlowe, YouTube true crime content creator.
This is Crime Weekly presented by ID, and we're here to talk about crimes in the headlines while also taking a deeper look into cases that have fascinated us both personally and professionally. So Stephanie, I gotta ask, are you like a web sleuth?
Well, you could say that, but you could also say I have a need to know everything and get to the bottom of it. If you're looking for a Wikipedia recitation of these cases, this is not the place for you. We are going to be covering many cases you may already know about from a new perspective, and some you may never have heard of.
That's right. As a former investigator, I'm going to take you behind the scenes and give you an inside perspective to how a detective would approach these cases. I really want to break down the investigatory process and take the term armchair detective to the next level.
And as someone who's been interested in true crime for a long time and has a desire to examine all the evidence, circumstantial or otherwise, I'm going to give you all the dirty details.
Exactly. We're here to entertain, but we're also here to educate and inform, and to make sure that you don't become the topic of our next conversation.
We will be releasing episodes every Friday starting on December 4th, so subscribe to Crime Weekly on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm also going to link to our website where, as we do these cases, we'll be putting up resources and things in the website, videos and police reports and articles and things like that, so you can follow along a little more, because it's going to be a little strange for me working on a podcast instead of YouTube, because in YouTube I can play these videos and put up pictures and stuff, but on podcasts you can't. You really just have to make the most impact with your words only. So that will be a challenge, I think, for me, but I'm up for it and I'm looking forward to it. I'm so excited. I know a lot of you have been asking for a podcast, and there will be a day when I do go out on my own and start my own podcast, especially considering how much YouTube appears to hate me by unsubscribing people from my channel. But for now, this is how I learn. This is how I grow. We have a great team of people working with us and helping us create this podcast. And as I'm going through this process, I'm learning more and more, so that one day I will strike out on my own and be able to do my own podcast as well as this one. So it's very exciting. I'm very excited. I feel very blessed and very humbled by all the amazing opportunities that I have. And I owe that all to you guys. Don't ever think that I forget that. I know that every success I have is a success that we all share together. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys, each and every one of you. I will never forget that. I remember it every single day. I'm so grateful. But we're working with great people. Derek's an awesome co-host. We were very, very fast friends. We have a lot in common. Our personalities are similar, but also different in all the right ways, in all the best ways. He's great. He's been a good friend to me. He's been a big help to me. We're also working with Audio Boom and Investigation Discovery. Both companies have amazing teams of people helping, walking us through this process. And I'm learning so much, and I'm looking to just use everything I learned to grow more in the future, so that, we can all continue our true crime relationship together for as long as possible. So go ahead and check out Crime Weekly. Also, don't forget to sign up for Magellan TV if you haven't already and you're interested. I think it makes a really great Christmas gift, honestly, because that's what I got my dad for Christmas last year. I got him a year's worth, and he messaged me maybe 2 weeks ago. No, it was the end of October, saying that he knew his year was coming to an end soon, and wondering if that's what I could get him for Christmas this year. So that actually makes my job a lot easier, because my dad's very hard to shop for. But check out Magellan TV in the description box. Check out the links to Crime Weekly in the description box, our new podcast. I'm so excited. Thank you guys so much for being here. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep. The mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name. Better say I Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. And so you got to let it go. I got blood